There are some changes needed with this Minnesota Gophers football team. We're going to talk about the Michigan game and what changes are needed after it, but it might not be exactly what you are thinking.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden
No matter what
Gophers,
we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
your daily podcast on the Minnesota
Whatever
Golden
turns out, however it
Gophers.
turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And you know what? Sometimes it is not easy to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day because there are games like last week where we come out and we just get absolutely blown up. And you know what? It is hard to find the positives of that, but we're not going to talk about the positives on the show. We're not going to bash the team either, but there are some huge changes needed from this Michigan game because the Gophers were picked apart, plain and simple. And yes, you want to see more fight from them, but there are also learnings and things we can take from it to ask ourselves why. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything moving forward, because we will have 2024 commits interviews here this week. Hopefully I'm helping to have a player interview on the show for you here this week. And then we're going to talk about the Big Ten Media Days, which are happening today and tomorrow, which I will be covering for you as well. But let's jump into this Michigan recap because folks need it and because folks really just need to know why. But the first thing I want to lead this thing off with, we got to think about how we react after these games, folks. It has an impact, but overall, the negative Minnesota fans are always the loudest after a loss. They're very vocal, and after a rivalry win or a bigger win, these are the same type of fans that don't cheer for the win, don't have excitement for the win. They focus on what went wrong. And it's the same fools who currently trash their quarterback online and post about trashing their quarterback on a post for a recruit quarterback, commit quarterback for the future of the Gophers, but don't realize that if I'm trashing my current player on a post of a commit player coming in, why would that commit player want to come here or not see it as, oh, are they going to treat me like this too? Like, folks, you got to think about your words still have actions, even hiding behind different profile pictures and whatnot on different social media platforms. So overall, you got to take a step back. You can be frustrated. You can be upset. Heck, I am. It is a very frustrating loss. But overall, these are the same type of people that if you call them out or if you troll them back, they get mad at you for being trolled or being called out. But it's okay for them to trash student athletes on social media without a care. Now, all of this, if you feel attacked by that statement, one, it was probably for you specifically, and two, I'm not sorry about it. But if you don't feel attacked by that statement, you can probably think of multiple people that you know that fall into that category. So we have to do better. Now, this isn't me saying, oh, I'm accepting losing and losing is acceptable and I'm settling for mediocrity. No, none of that. But a lot of fans, the vocal ones, are dealing in absolutes, and that mentality isn't what builds a college program, plain and simple. And yes, you can talk about year 7. It is year 7, and you want to see progression, but there are going to be steps of regression along the path. You can see that among most college football coaches, maybe not your Ohio States, maybe not your Michigans here and there, but you know what? It has taken time to build up to those things and to get to recruiting to those things. It might not be Harbaugh who built that up or Day who built that up, but it's come from generations before them. It's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be struggles along the way. There's going to be changes because you know what? These students and student athletes leave programs 4 to 5 years. And now sometimes they leave even earlier because of the transfer portal. So we have to take a deep breath. You can get frustrated by the big loss to the best team in the country, which I said all last week. And yes, that game was absolutely frustrating, but not one single team has looked good versus Michigan for an entire game. Most of the teams are out of it by halftime. So to the folks that are saying we won't win another game, it's reactionary. It's facetious. You're talking about an Iowa team that lost its starting quarterback, that has a quarterback that's throwing worse passing percentages than any of the quarterbacks on our team, and yet they've went out and they beat Michigan State and they've beat Purdue with him not playing well. So there are still games on this schedule that Minnesota can win, including those 3 teams that I just mentioned. They can be in the fight with each and every one of them, hopefully with a healthy running game, hopefully with things starting to click, and hopefully with some major changes in this bye week. So after reevaluating the game, here are my main takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is Michigan was just better. Plain and simple. They're deeper, they're faster, they're stronger. They're the best team in the country, in my opinion. And I've been saying that prior to us playing them and getting a beatdown. There was no time to throw the ball. The offensive line was collapsing, and this is an offensive line that has been pretty decent. I'm not saying it's up to the caliber of what we've seen over the past few years for the Gophers, and we lost 4 starters. Or 3 starters. So it's like, yes, you're not always going to be able to plug and play right away. Now, it's not just the offensive line that was struggling. There were wide receivers that couldn't get separation. And in the very brief 1-second windows that they did have, sometimes throws were missed. Throws were forced, and that didn't help either. Michigan is just straight up a juggernaut. This team looks better than the last 2 Michigan teams we've seen for the past 2 years. And those 2 teams combined for 25-3 record, with the losses mainly coming from the college football playoff. This team is great, plain and simple. So that was the first takeaway, but it's not an excuse. There are major changes needed for the Gophers. And the first one is it's time to change the play caller. This is the most important thing, in my opinion. Now, I said at the beginning of the season, in the offseason, before it was announced, all of that I wished Minnesota went out and got a young, up-and-coming play caller from a team that was up and coming, like a Tulane. Tulane was my example back in the day, but something of the sort. Someone who's young, someone who's hungry, someone who has more modern concepts to the game to evolutionize or revolutionize our passing game and get it more incorporated and get it more creative. That is the huge thing here, because you see a Michigan team that has had immense success rushing the ball over the last few years and still finding it this year. But you see them adding elements of creativity with their quarterback. I think of one play in the early first half where J.J. McCarthy, they're driving the field. He looks off to the right. There's 2 different wide receivers running crossing routes out to the right side. One's running a corner out, and the other one looks to be running kind of a post. He points and directs his receiver, and it draws the defense's attention. I believe one of the safeties or linebackers started to pull back that way. And as he's doing that, keeps his eyes this way, his real target is the tight end heading to the left on an out route. And he all of a sudden, after he drives that away, hits the tight end on the left to the out route, who has more space to create, and creates an 8-yard, 9-yard gain out of a play that maybe didn't look like it had anything open until he drew the attention elsewhere. It's little concepts like that. That isn't just like, oh, J.J. McCarthy naturally thought of that and he pointed and he knew it. No, that is emphasized. That is stressed. That is built in through their offensive coordinator and through their play calling system. Creativity, little elements like that go a long way. And you saw little flashes like that to get different players open throughout the entirety of the game. This Gophers offense needs that, plain and simple, because this internal hiring of the same exact offensive process, except for, this guy's a little younger and he thinks a little bit differently than this guy. Kirk Shiraka did this and Greg Harbaugh thinks this. No, it looks the same, except for, to be 100% honest with you, it looks like Greg Harbaugh doesn't see the actual visual changes necessary through the flow of the game. And yes, it might be year 1 for him in that type of role, but at the same time, we don't really have the patience from this fan base to try and test it out. Especially when the passing game, you can sit there and watch film at times. I'm sure that any team is watching film on this current Gophers team and can find a couple of the big type of plays that they like to set up. Here's how we're going to address that. And all of a sudden we don't have the opportunity for those big type of plays, or we get 1 or 2 of them. And then that's that. You're not going to see anything else in that department for the rest of the game. That is how it's been looking, because teams can watch the film, see what we're doing, break it down how they're going to address it and stop it. And then once it's been stopped once or twice, the Gophers abandon it. Plain and simple. And that all comes from play calling. Our default right now is quarter one, get creative, start passing, do rushing, do different elements. And you know what? After that, quarter two, we can establish the run a little bit more, maybe take some play action shots. But quarter 3 and 4, we're running the ball, run the clock. I don't care if we're down 40. I don't care if we're up 20. We're going to run the ball. Clearly, that's not working. And it comes down to play calling. I don't know if it's directly the offensive coordinator and us just not having other plays we can pull out that have creative elements or what. But people talk about these players like Tristyn Spann-Ford fell off. Ethan Kaliak-Manis, he's not it. He doesn't show. How can you say that at the same time of watching quarterbacks in the NFL that get all the excuses of, oh, his play caller changed 3 times. Oh, this guy hasn't had the same system for – neither have these Gophers players. Ethan Kaliak-Manis has had 3 different offensive coordinators in his time here. Now, yes, they might have similar elements, but it's plain and simple, they're different because Kirk Ciarrocca's mind is not the same as Greg Harbaugh's mind. And you can see that the proof is in the pudding because when you look at when Kirk Ciarrocca was working with Ethan last year, and as time developed, you could see things where, oh, that's starting to click. Oh, something special is happening. Oh, Ethan's passing for 300 yards, all of that stuff. And we saw better openings for our playmakers. Tristyn Spann-Ford was getting included in that stuff. Daniel Jackson was getting included in that stuff. And those were players we weren't expecting things from last year to the capacity that we saw them getting it done. And then Kirk Ciarrocca leaves the program, goes to Rutgers, and Rutgers is finding success offensively. That stuff adds up. And yet it seems like our offense is falling off, but all the players are catching the heat right now. These players didn't forget how to play or become bad. In my honest opinion, the play calling is poor. And you see the flashes of moments throughout this season. Those flashes are coming from more pure talent than things that are being schemed up to accentuate them. There needs to be a fundamental change in the play calling, plain and simple. And that needs to happen now in this bye week. Because when you have 2 weeks to work on elements to become less predictable, you need to use every opportunity. So maybe that means changing your play callers. Maybe it's time to give Matt Simon a try. And if that doesn't work, maybe you have to hit the well again this offseason. So those are just a handful of the things and main takeaways that I have. I still have a couple more I want to dive into, including the passing game, including our youth on our team, and including some more trust that needs to be developed. And we're going to talk about that coming up next. But first, I got to hit you up with our friends over at Athletic Brewing because now is your time for the game changer of the week. And it was tough to pick one for this Michigan game, but it was Dragan Kesich who hit a 54-yard field goal and got us on the board early. Now, much like Dragan Kesich, Athletic Brewing Company has changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Athletic brews are the real deal. Their brews are great tasting, award-winning, and they've beaten out full-strength beers in global competitions. On top of that, they brew 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, sours, you name it, so much more. And the best of all, there are no hangovers attached. That sounds like a win-win to me. So you can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use promo code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's LOCKEDON at 15% off at checkout, athleticbrewing.com. Athletic Brewing Company and athleticbrewing.com and near beer. Exclusions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, Gopher fans. So there's more takeaways I want to get into here. And the next one is the lack of the passing game. And it's somewhat tied to the play calling, which we just dove into a bit. But at the same time, the lack of the passing in that environment we just had in the Michigan game, regardless of turnovers. And the turnovers were bad. Don't get me wrong. The lack of pass calls made in a game where you're down 30-plus points for a majority of the game is atrocious. It's atrocious. I mean, when you're down 30-plus, versus starters, your starters versus their twos, you might as well go and try to generate success in the passing game and get things clicking. Because you know what? If you can't try to pass the ball when you're down 30-plus points, then you might as well just say, we're not going to pass the ball all year. You might as well say it. You have to change something up. 16 passing attempts when you're down, and 11 of those passing attempts were in the first half. So you're telling me you passed the ball 5 times in the second 2 quarters of football when you're down 3+ scores in the second half? Michigan didn't remove their starters until the late third quarter when they scored 45 points. But we didn't pass the ball more than 5 times in the second half. Yes, you can talk about, oh, but we had 2 pick sixes. You're right. We did. But how are you going to improve and be able to start to make adjustments, not only for your quarterback's sake, but from a play calling standpoint, if you don't ever pass the ball? You're not going to be on the field very long. And on top of that, how are you supposed to get better at something? And on top of all that, it's not just the fact that we won't pass the ball, it's the fact that our pass plays take so long to develop. And then games like this where the defense is absolutely balling and we don't have the time to get the ball out of our hands quickly and let things develop, and you only have one check down. If they take that check down away, what are you doing? You're either taking a sack, you're throwing it in the ball into harm's way. It's not setting up your team for success. So you have long developing pass plays. You're not passing the ball anymore, but people are calling for the quarterback's job. No quarterback in the country is going to do better in those circumstances. And right now, especially on this roster, no quarterback is going to find more success. And that's just me being 100% honest. You give your quarterback the time, and he passes for 14 for 16 with 2 touchdowns, and he has 1 pass in the entire game where he looked bad, where it was a bad forced throw. That was the game prior to this. But now all of a sudden people say he's had no good games this season. It's facetious, and it's you acting out of anger, and I get it. It's frustrating. Clearly, I sound frustrated in this podcast. But the thing is, you match up with a team like this Michigan team where they can get defenders in the backfield in a blink of an eye, and you're not going to have success because you don't have quick pass plays. You don't have things to get out of your quarterback's hands and get it out of harm's way. You have to put the ball in dangerous positions because it's either that or you take 50 sacks. Which one do you want? Which one do you prefer? But it's a quarterback. Look, when it came to the interceptions, one was very much earned, one was very much forced. Plain and simple. The first interception was a great jump by the cornerback. I'll call it what it is. Will Johnson was sitting back in a zone look, and he looks like he's playing deep man on Crooms, but he watches the quarterback's eyes. Then he passes Crooms off to the safety, jumps the route as it's an out route for Daniel Jackson, and he took it home. But you can also see that Michigan is very clearly anticipating that route concept because we don't have a very diverse route tree for this offense. The second interception, Keon Sabb makes a good play, but it was forced into tight coverage by Ethan Kaliakmanis. He didn't see the linebacker lurking. He sees that Elijah Spencer is coming on a comeback route, and he feels the pressure of Michigan sending 5, but it was actually a delayed 6 pressure coming as well. And on top of that, he has one player sitting in the gap that he can't see. Now, he knows that Elijah Spencer is running a comeback route, and he doesn't have much separation or timing. So in order to give that ball any chance, he has to get out of his hands early. So before Elijah Spencer makes his break, you can see that Ethan has the ball coming out of his hands. He doesn't see the guy lurking. He picks it off, and he takes it home. That was forced. Even with that defender not in the hole sitting there, that pass was going to be very, very difficult. But those are the things you have to make, decisions you have to take sometimes when you're not getting any chances or any seconds to pass the ball. And it was a poor decision, and we paid for it. But overall, the passing game is very much struggling, and I don't know how the Gophers can move forward without some huge changes in the play calling. And that has to happen in this bye week. But on top of that, you flip to the defensive side of ball, and our youth is showing, especially defensively. Young players aren't ready for some of the tasks that are being asked of them, and the Gophers are feeling that pain. Maverick Baranowski, he could be a really good player for this team in the future, especially being a redshirt freshman. He wasn't ready for this type of opportunity, and he's stepping up at times, but he's also showing his youth and making mistakes often. Aiden Gooseby is making mistakes often. Some of these players that are being forced into minutes, Tariq Watson, who came in for Justin Wally's injury, some of these players aren't ready for that high level of snaps right now. And the positions we put them in, especially against a Michigan, a North Carolina, and it shows. And those are the players who are being picked on because they're not ready for that moment. But the Gophers don't really have a choice with health right now. So that's tough. And the final thing that I have for a takeaway is towards our quarterback, Ethan Kaliakmanis. You have to go out there and you have to build trust with these other pass catchers, because you can see the trust he has with Daniel Jackson. And at times you can see it with Corey Crooms too. But he needs to get out there in this bye week and he needs to call up Brev. He needs to call up Elijah Spencer. He needs to put in some extra time with them, get them extra reps, get the timing, get the trust, because the trust needs to be reestablished with those two players to help spread the ball in this offense that already doesn't pass the ball enough. And maybe drops have made some hesitation along the way for Elijah Spencer and Tristyn Spann-Ford, but you need them when it comes down the line of trying to stay and get more wins to get you to a bowl game. Because that 8-88 connection last year, it worked wonders. And this team could really use that juice again. Now we're going to wrap up today's show talking about how the Gophers need to get healthy, and that's how we're going to close this one up coming up next. First, I got to talk to you about our friends at eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it also keeps your ride or die vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for at eBay Motors. And on top of that, they have eBay Guaranteed Fit, which guarantees your part will fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, Gophers fans. Injuries are playing a huge factor for the Gophers right now. Plain and simple, it's not an excuse, but it is very tough for the Gophers. You've got Cody Lindenberg, who hasn't played a single game this year. He hasn't played, but he's been talked about this offseason as potentially the second best player on this entire defense. He flies to the ball, a leader on the defense, potentially the best linebacker Coach Fleck has had in his time as a head coach. And we saw the results of what Cody Lindenberg brought as a healthy player last year. And we are looking for him to be here and take that next step. But you know what? It's had a huge impact on the defense, especially forcing players, young players like Maverick Baranowski, to be in there that maybe shouldn't see as many snaps this upcoming season, that weren't as ready to be the full-time starter as they were maybe a rotational guy getting a feel for it all. Now, Cody Lindenberg's presence has definitely been missing and felt for this team, but people are wondering what is going on, because he's been questionable like every week. And it sounds like he was well on his way to playing in that North Carolina game, and as he was ramping up, maybe something was tweaked or re-aggravated or something, and that has kind of slowed the process down. But hopefully this bye week will allow us to see him get well, get right, and be able to play for this Iowa game and the rest of the season. On top of that, you've got Chris Ottman-Bell. Nobody has a clue of what is happening on that front. Could it be similar with Cody Lindenberg, where maybe he was coming up, getting ready, getting revamped, and something happened? Or it's just confusing. The snaps were ticking up from week 3 to week 4, and then all of a sudden we've got back-to-back games without designations, and folks just kind of want to know what is happening. Not in a sense of why the heck isn't Chris Ottman-Bell out on the field, because the fans would love to see him on the field, but more so because they want to know that Crab is okay. The community has been excited for Crab to be back, especially seeing him go down to that injury last year, and the hopes were so high for him. But mostly people just want to pull for him and know that he is going to be okay long term. So it would be great if we could get an answer on his health and what is going on with that situation, regardless of what it means for the Gophers in the on-field time. We just want to know that Crab is good. On top of that, Brockington out for the season, huge injury. Darnell Jeffries, who was going to be a big contributor for that interior defensive line, out for the season. That's 4 key injuries right there that are all players that were expected to play big roles in this Gophers team. Now, on top of that, then you have your true freshman, Darius Taylor, go out. Now, hopefully he is on the mend. He was limited in practice during Michigan week, which is progress from the week prior. He didn't practice at all, so that should be a positive sign. But basically, he now has 2 weeks to get right in order to not miss any more time. And also, you have the comfort of knowing Zach Evans has stepped up and shown that he can help in this room and be effective on top of the depth of Bryce Williams and Sean Tyler. So you don't have to have your true freshman walk into 30 touches right from jump again as he comes out of an injury. You can ramp him back up slowly without putting him at risk to re-injure. And then you have two more additions this week, Jack Henderson, Justin Wally, both huge impact players for this defense. Every player I've just named right there has been a player who is expected to get a vast majority of the snaps. That's what, 7 starting level players that you're losing to injury. And Jack Henderson and Justin Wally just add to it. We don't know the severity of those injuries, but both have been top 5 graded players for this defense. And they've been major impact players for the defense. They've created turnovers for the defense. And with a secondary that has struggled since week 3, the concerns could be massive if these two players have long-term injuries and can't get back after the bye week. So this bye week was perfectly timed for the Gophers to hopefully get right, get healthy, and get back on track to try and get out there and get a bowl game, try and get out there and shake off what we've seen in this Michigan game and some collapses in the Northwestern fourth quarter. But the thing is, if you don't collapse in that Northwestern fourth quarter, yes, people are frustrated by this Michigan loss and how big it was, but the season looks a little bit different. It's now starting to compound and pile up, and that is what is causing the frustration for fans. So the Gophers need to get healthy, get right, fix play calling, and come out strong versus Iowa. Because if you can go out there and you can win the Iowa game, and you can make some noise in some of the other games, but mainly this Iowa and Wisconsin games, if you bring home rivalry trophies, even in a down year, there's some glimmer of hope, success, happiness, because you beat your main rivals and have bragging rights for the season, even in a year when you struggled. So the Gophers got to get it together. They got to address the play calling, and they got to get healthy. That's the huge thing for the Gophers this week. Now, the rest of the week, we are going to have interviews with 2024 commits, as well as covering the Big Ten Media Days. We'll kind of split the episodes 15 minutes or so, but hopefully you'll tap in, hopefully you'll hit subscribe, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow. Row the boat, Sky, you might go Gophers as always, and don't forget to subscribe.